In this video, we're going to start to talk about dispersion of data. So we've talked about mean, what an average represents, but what also plays an important role is how spread out the data is. So this kind of starts to introduce this idea. First big thing is we talk about finding the range. So the range is just the difference between the high and the low. High and low. All right, so to find differences, we're just going to subtract. So I just need to know what the high value is, and I know what the lowest number is, and find the difference between them. So our range is going to be, here's your high, here's the low. Now this data happens to be in order because we're going to do a couple other things with it. But in general, we would kind of just filter through the numbers and find the high number, find the low number, and then just subtract. So 97 minus 63 is going to be 34. Okay. So another thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to break our data up and start kind of looking at sections of it. So one of the more straightforward ways to do this is breaking things into what we call quartiles. Quartiles are quarters, just like a football game. So it is, here's kind of what it's defined as. It's the boundaries boundaries that divide data into four equal sets. All right, so how do we do this? So here's kind of the directions to it, and then we'll do this with this data right here. So we're going to split the data in half. Okay, what that means is we are finding the median. Okay, so we're going to take this data, split it in half. All right, so we're going to come back to that in a second. Once we split this data in half, so somewhere in this middle section here, I don't know exactly where it is, but it's going to be somewhere around here. So we split it in half, and then we're going to split each half in half. So splitting halves of halves makes quarters. So once we do this, then split each half in half. i.e. find, it's not a median, it's a median. Find medians for each half. Okay, so first off, to find the median, we are going to find the middle number. Now, if we were just finding the median, I would be crossing off values, but then we're going to do it again, so I don't want to cross it off. So I'm going to put these little dots above it. So I'm going to put a dot above the high and the low. And then I'm going to basically work my way in and see if I can figure out which of these is the middle. Okay, so let me do a couple at a time. So if I do 3 small ones, I'll do 3 big ones. If I do, I'll do 3 more. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3 more. 2, 3 small, so 3 large. Okay, so we're starting to get into the middle. So we'll go one at a time. Here's a low one, here's a big one, here's a low one, here's a big one. All right, that's what we're left with. Perfect. So we have our median. And then we're going to do the median of the medians. So now we're looking at here. So we're not going to include the median. We're going to include just those values here. So I'll do the same thing. I'll put underneath it, we'll take a low one with a high one. And then let me do 2 at a time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, so this time you get 2 numbers in the middle, right? So you're sitting here, you can't take 2. So what we do is we find the middle of those 2. So this is kind of where our our value is going to be. And really, we find the average between it is really a way of thinking of it. So finding the average means we're just going to add them up and divide by 2, or you can kind of eyeball it-ish at, it's going to be 76.5. So here, let me write these numbers out. So 84. So 84 is our median. This one is called the lower quartile. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on this side. And if we had this situation on the left, we're absolutely going to have the same situation on the right, where we're going to have 2 numbers and we're going to figure out the middle between them. So I'm going to go 2 small numbers, 2 big numbers, 2 small numbers, 2 big numbers. Maybe just go one at a time. 1 small, 1 big, and here is our middle. So we're cutting that piece in half, so that's 90.5. And that is called the upper quartile. Okay, so here's what this does. What it does is it takes our data and it splits it into groups of 4. So you have the same number of numbers in each group. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 in each category. But this also kind of gives us an idea of how spread out are some of the numbers. You know, like maybe these numbers are grouped a little tighter than these numbers. Maybe some of the lower numbers are more spread out. Maybe the high numbers are spread out or very grouped together. But it's a very quick way to start to really dive a little deeper into data, okay? And then out of this, we're looking for what is the inner quartile range. So your inner quartile range is not a lot once you figure out these values. It's already, the work has already been done. So let's write this down, inner quartile range. You already have what you need for it. It represents the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So the difference between them. All right, so and let's just kind of start our data fresh, where this was our median, and between these two of 76.5 was the lower quartile. Between these two are the upper quartile, 90.5. So our inner quartile range is going to be 90.5 minus 76.5. And that equals 14. So what that represents, this value represents the range of the middle 50% of the data. So it's literally, that's your middle 50% of your data. And sometimes if you take a stats class, that they cut out the low values, they cut out the high values, because sometimes they're not a great representation. If you're talking about salaries in a company, you know, maybe you have a lot more high or a lot more low, and so it kind of isn't a great representation. So instead, you can kind of just focus on the middle 50% of your data, and that would give you a much, much better representation of whatever you're potentially talking about. Just depends on what it is. So that was, we talked about range. Range is just the difference between the high and the low. And then we are taking our data and breaking it up into quarters, which is just finding the middle, and then finding the middle of that middle. And then again, if you got one number, that's great. If you have two numbers, we just find the middle of that, and that's our median of a lower half or an upper half. And again, that was called a lower quartile. That one's called an upper quartile. And if you do the difference between them, that represents the inner quartile range. All right, thanks.